Yeah, I grew up in San Diego, California. My dad was in the Marine Corps. That's what brought us out there. I was born in Boston area, Gloucester, shout out Gloucester, Massachusetts. They just had a ship go down, a fishing boat go down, and had some guys die and a girl that was on shore. So they had powerful family history there. We got some roots there. But my dad was all about that warm weather, having his shirt off in the military. So you haven't been in the Coast Guard. No, if you have the choice of a warm weather or cool weather spot, you choose the warm weather spot. That's what my dad did. Lived on a Marine base in El Toro. It was a Chinook base, the double propeller helicopters. So I was around that, but it wasn't the culture. My grandfather was a naval captain, Annapolis graduate. So I had some military history in my family, but it was not pushed by any stretch. And my dad was not a military guy, I would say. He did his 6 and got out and was, he's the guy that they're like, hey, once a Marine, always a Marine. He goes, once was enough, thanks though. We had a lot of respect for the military and being an American and a lot of pride there, but it definitely wasn't prominent. Some challenges though, is a lot of people might have alcohol, drugs. My dad would be the first one to admit he went through a lot of his struggles. But I was exposed to different religions and spirituality, and I always felt this guiding force or like a protection around me or with me, and I always felt like I was like meant for interesting things or powerful things, but I didn't really know what that meant. And that feeling came to a lot of clarity when I saw SEALs training in the Bay when I was 7. And I saw some glow lights floating, and my dad told me those are Navy SEALs training. I'm like, whoa, dude, commandos in the water. And so just reading a lot about it during that time, fascinated with Green Berets in Vietnam, SEALs in Vietnam, that whole time period. And so that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. That got shelved, girls and sports, and the history of my life has been this masterclass of self-sabotage, I would say. It was like I was running a masterclass, in which I'd like to think I've gotten corrected. And it started in high school. So I had some scholarship opportunities playing lacrosse and football, and I get kicked out of school. So this was how immature I was, and and we'll kind of hit on these, I love the Truthful Productions, I like getting into the truth. A lot of people they talk about the highs, but not a lot of the lows and how they felt during the lows. I lacked self-awareness on such a massive scale. I didn't really understand the gravity of what happened. So I get kicked out of school for possession of marijuana. It was in my car. It doesn't really matter how it happened, but I go, okay, kind of whatever. And I had a cop who was also a coach on the campus, and he goes, Taylor, this is probably going to affect you playing lacrosse next year. And I'm like, what? Like, come on, nah, dude. I got kicked out of school, couldn't play sports, and all those opportunities kind of got flushed down the toilet. And I remember being like, still not really getting it, but going into college and now getting kicked out and dealing with, I walked through a door, I got scars all over my face, walked through a glass door.
This was in college?
Yeah, my first year. And so I got 70 stitches on my face fell off. And so I'm like, that's 2 weeks into the semester, right? And I'm on the sideline because I just had gotten in a crash on the freeway, got ejected out of a lifted Tundra going 80, 90 miles an hour. And I dislocated my hip. But I walk out of the hospital a few days later, by the grace of God, banged up, but fine. And
these situations, are there like drugs and alcohol involved, or is it just bad luck?
We had been partying out in the desert, but I was sitting shotgun, and we had been driving for about 3 hours. I think he fell asleep. I never asked him, the driver, what happened. Or there was some wind, maybe a mixture of both, but he I woke up, and he goes, and I woke up with the car going like on the freeway, all the glass, and then I woke up way down the road. And I woke up and I went, ugh, and I saw the 2 guys that were in the car with me all bloody. I think I had my seatbelt on, but like no shoulder, or no seatbelt probably. And then went out, and they thought I was dead, so they didn't even come over to me. But and I walk out of the hospital a few days later. I'm the first one out of the hospital, mind you. Pretty unfazed, actually, pretty fine. But that was the start of this that was a sign, I should say, where you'd think that people would pump the brakes, but I really just didn't. And then the real low though came to fruition about a year later, where I woke up. Now by this time had been failed out of one, pretty much kicked out of two junior colleges, playing football and not going, not working, doing drugs. And I woke up and I heard this. I've had a moment of clarity from God. People call it whatever they want. I knew God was speaking to me. And I woke up in this apartment and it was raining. And this homeless guy had said something to me some months before. And he goes, you know what rain means? Change. And I went, that was the first thing I thought about. And I called my dad, who had been through a lot of lows. And I just felt like the walls were closing in. Like the most lonely, hopeless feeling you could possibly imagine. I'm 19 years old. And I go, I need to change something. So I just literally gave my dad all the drugs I had, all the money, and said, dude, I gotta go. And they put me in I wasn't like detoxing or anything. I was just not living right. And I just had no direction, was rudderless. And no real connection with my faith, no real connection with higher power, even though I had felt like I had been protected through a lot of things. And I got put in like a crazy detox center because it was what worked for the insurance, but it was lockdown facility, crazy people, running naked in the hallways and getting off heroin. And my roommate was a 40-year-old getting off heroin. And I'm 19 going, damn, dude, like I got to get out of here. And that's what I did. And that's when I moved back to Boston and kind of started correcting some things for a couple of years. And I did. And then got transferred back to college and finished up there.
So at that point, I know you said you had that little spark of interest as a child about the Navy SEALs, yeah. But when you were kind of getting in trouble and all that there in college, getting kicked out, what did you want to do? Or did you have any type of plan or idea?
It's a good question. I always knew I was going to the military. Well, was kind of there always. So I kind of took college not that seriously, but there was a time where I was like, I'm gonna be a doctor. So it was like, maybe I'll go be a military doctor. And that was when I started to kind of get focused. And dude, and I got straight A's in advanced subjects for about 2 years, probably about a year and a half to catch up, to actually transfer back to University of California school. So I was pretty locked on. But when I transferred back to University of California, Santa Cruz, I realized that aptitude's a real thing. And I hit multivariable calculus and organic chemistry, advanced organic chemistry, and it was hard. And I was struggling, dude. And I also really wasn't disciplined at this time. I started drinking a lot more and partying and girls, and that whole distraction kind of picked back up. And so I was just struggling. So I changed majors, did a pre-law major. And so I actually finished with like a politics and pre-law, like thinking maybe I'll go into law. Because the truth was this, I wanted to be a Navy SEAL, but it kind of felt like a dream. Like growing up in San Diego, dude, I knew a lot of people, not a lot, a handful of people that tried SEAL training, all-American water polo players, a couple wrestlers, and everybody failed. Nobody made it. And I'm like, damn, dude, like, I'm an okay athlete, but dude, I don't want to end up on a boat. And so getting out of college, I had stacked some problems. A lot of arrests, misdemeanors, DUIs, driving on a suspended, probably had 17 arrests probably in about 2 years. So no felonies though. Not like pushing grandmas in the street or robbing people, just being an idiot a lot. So when I got out, and I was so immature, man, thinking back, like what was I thinking? I go, hey, I'm gonna go to the Marine Corps. Hey, that'll be cool because at least I'll get a gun and I'll be able to deploy or whatever. And they said no, man. They said they wouldn't even talk to me. They said, dude, you're on probation. You have pending court cases. You're an idiot. You can't even be hitting here, really. So I went to jail. I got a judge to commute my probation. I had 3-year probationary term that he's like, we'll commute if you do 6 months in jail. I was like, okay, like I'm not gonna wait 3 years. And so I ended up doing 4. Served about 90, so nothing but a lockdown facility in Bay Area, so shitty. A lot of guys waiting to go to the penitentiary, waiting on court cases. I was the only one really there on misdemeanors at all. But I actually felt good when I was there because it felt like I was clearing some stuff up. And so, but no guarantee that any military would talk to me, or that I could get in. But I had this delusional confidence about where I was going. And I still wanted to be a SEAL, but it still felt like a dream. So I walk out of jail, I go start down this process, Marines again. I talked to the officers. They were like, no, dude, you too many tattoos. They actually turned me down for tattoos. So couldn't do tattoos because of the tattoos. Army said, dude, get the fuck out of here. You know, it's like, dude, your background is just too checkered. We don't
Really, the Army was picking.
Yeah, and so this actually going into another real low point. Dude, when the Army said no, I was right at my mom's house, sleeping on the couch. I'm sleeping in my high school bedroom. I'm 23, fresh out of jail, riding a bike because I had no car. And I remember going, the Army won't even let me in. And I sat on the couch, dude. And you know, if you've ever been, and people watching, ever been in those films where you just feel like hopelessness, that's what I felt like. I was like, the only thing I wanted to do, and I was just assuming it was gonna be kind of a no-brainer. Now they're saying no. Pretty much curled in the fetal position, man, for like 2 days, you know, plus or minus, and not literally, but kind of, you know. So I started researching military units that could take me or would. And that's when I came across the Foreign Legion. I probably knew about them a little bit before when I was a kid, just being in that world, being interested in it. But now it came on my radar again. All right, this is a unit that takes guys with checkered pasts. I can serve, but I did have student loans and some real life stuff that I wanted to square away before, you know, you're gonna go over there and pop chalks, and that stuff probably wouldn't happen. So I was like, let me give the United States military one last chance.
Because the Foreign Legion is not the United States.
It's not the United States. You're not gonna make a lot of money. It's very, very bare bones on the money. So financially, my student loans were pretty massive. You know, my parents didn't pay for college, so my student loans were massive. They were due. They were coming up on being due, and I wanted to handle that. My mom had co-signed for a couple, and I just didn't want to leave that part, so that was a concern. So I went to the Navy and was like, Hail Mary. I was like, dude, I wrote down all my charges and stuff and gave it to the dude, and he goes, we can work with this. And that was a moment where it was like that super low to high, but it was still really unsure. I still had to get through MEPS. I still had to do a lot of strategic answering, you know, with how I went about it. Not lie, I'm not telling people to lie. I'm saying, you know, you got to answer strategically.
Anybody who's been in the military knows about how to answer those questions.
Strategic answering, yeah, strategic truth.
But so at that point, I know you said you wanted to, you know, get some action in some way or another with maybe a weapon. But at that point, walking into that Navy recruiter office, were you just willing to take any, you know, opportunity?
Here's the interesting piece is I went there to be a SEAL, and they said, dude, you can't even get into the Navy really unless you wrangle shit, you know, as a whatever job or a SEAL.